know you got to worry when you come up front and somebody says, Lord, help those kids. So the Lord help those workers. We won't say who said that, but it wasn't me. So my mom sent me a picture this week, and I didn't realize, I had actually forgot all about it, but I had done a drawing when I was in prison. Did a lot of drawings in prison. You get a lot of time in prison to do stuff, you know? It's like a nice, relaxing break. I mean, you don't have to, you don't have to really work if you don't want to. You can sleep all day. I mean, it's, your food's taken care of, your bed, it's all provided. You don't have to pay rent.
Woo.
I mean,
Where do I sign up?
Really easy, Joey.
Yeah.
but I would never want to go back. Okay,
Yeah, there you
You
go.
don't want to sign up again.
Yeah, I've done my time. I don't want to sign up. But I did a drawing, and I'd actually forgotten all about it. And she sent me a picture of it, and when I saw it, I was like, wow, that really goes with my message today in a lot of areas. And I wasn't going to ask her for it back, I'm not like that. I don't just give something and be like, hey, that thing I gave you? I want it back. But she actually asked me, do you want this back? And I was like, well, sure. And then she said, well, I'll mail it out to you. I don't know when I'll get it. And I'm thinking, wouldn't that be awesome if I got it before my message on Sunday? And it arrived in the mail Saturday. So I'm just going to hang it out here so you all can
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Oh my goodness, Rick.
see it. If I can, maybe I can. But that'll play into the message today. Can you all see it okay?
Looks like Willie Nelson.
Oh, Joey. You're terrible.
Really? All right.
He said way in the back.
We'll have a.
Prayer for him later.
You need to borrow my glasses, brother.
We'll have one.
Yeah.
I feel a lot of. I feel like God's wanting to say a lot to us today. One of the things that I think He wants to say first, I'm not going to be calling out any names or saying any personal prophecy, but when you hear it and it applies, then take it as a personal word. I feel like God wants to tell some people today that failure isn't complete until you stop trying. We fall a lot of times, right? And we mess up a lot of times. And a lot of times, if we're not careful, those fallings and those mess-ups will get in our minds that those are complete failures. But the complete failure isn't the falling or the mess-up. The complete failure is when you stop trying. It's after you've fallen and you've gotten up, you've fallen, you've gotten up, you've fallen, you've gotten up, and finally you come to a place where you just say, I'm done. I'm tired of getting up because I'm tired of falling, so I'm just going to stay down here. It's easier. That's the moment of failure. But even then, God is still gracious, right? Because I'm still alive, and as long as I'm still alive, then God has this ability to take this soul that gave up and cause it to get up. And sometimes, even in the midst of my failure, it's important to understand that life's not over. That time hasn't run out. That it's not too late. It may be too late for some things. I mean, that's just a reality, right? But it's not too late to get back up. It's not too late to overcome the failure. It's not too late to move beyond it. How many of you would say that you're going through a storm right now?
Woo!
Just 2, 3? Oh, okay. There they are. I was like, I'm waiting for hands, you know. I mean, I'm raising mine. I'm not like just asking for it by doing this. I mean, there's storms going on. From what I see in the Bible, there's really 3 big passages that deal with storms, and they're actually talking about different kinds of storms. And the purpose or the reason the storms have come up are different in each one of those places. And it's important to understand and to really look at the storm that we're in and to really figure out what kind of storm am I in. Because one storm back in the Old Testament, I mean, it's not Noah's flood, okay, is Jonah. Right? He gets on this boat, the storm comes up, and the people are terrified. They're like, what's going on? Jonah knows what's going on. He's like, yeah, it's me. Well, because see, God told me to go here, but I don't want to go there, so I'm actually going way over here. I'm going as far away from where God told me to go as I can possibly go. So that kind of storm would be a storm that would result in, as a result of rebellion and disobedience. Sometimes there's storms in our life because we're rebelling and we're disobedient. And sometimes the ship is about to sink, and we can sit in denial, right? Say, well, God would never bring a storm because I'm being disobedient. You read the same book I do? I mean, my book says Bible on it. Does yours? Because I'm pretty sure in every Bible that story's there. So I don't know how we work our way around it. I know. That's Old Testament. We're New Testament. Grace storms are not the result of disobedience. Come on, man. You know, they say in therapy that when you stop denying, that you've actually taken the first step to recovery. Some of us, I think we just need to stop being in denial about the fact that, God actually told us to do something and we're just stiff-necked. In other words, we've turned our neck and we're not allowing His hand to turn it back. That's what stiff-necked means. We've set ourselves in our direction. We become the Jonah on the ship and say, God, I don't care that you told me to go to Nineveh. I'm not going. And then we're sitting on the ship saying, well, God wouldn't bring this storm up. It's weather patterns. I mean, we can scientifically prove that, the low pressure front came in and it hit this high pressure front and the moon is in a different spot and so the waves are getting big. I mean, we got all of these excuses why we're in this storm, but none of them actually get to the reality that we're doing what we know we're not supposed to be doing. But that's not my message. The second storm we see in Matthew chapter 8, and the disciples in this chapter, they had gotten in the boat with Jesus and they were headed over to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and in the middle of the sea this storm comes up and the disciples start freaking out. Now this isn't a storm of rebellion, right? Because they're doing what Jesus had told them to do. How many of you think sometimes that just because I obey Jesus that the wind should actually help me and not fight me? Right? God, I'm doing what you asked me to do. Why am I getting all of this resistance? Isn't this your will? Why is the boat about to sink? Why don't I have any money in the bank? I thought prosperity was the... This storm, as you look at it, we can pull it apart. We'll do a little bit of that today, but this storm was really the result of the attack from the enemy. So we have storms that are produced because of disobedience. We have storms that are attacks from the enemy. And then there's another storm, which is actually just 6 chapters later in the book of Matthew. And again, it's the disciples. They get into the boat, and Jesus doesn't get in the boat with them at this time. He says, now you just go. Meet me over there. And so they get in the boat, and they get out into the middle, and the storm comes up. And at some point in the middle of this storm, Jesus walks out there on the water. Like, hey, this is kind of cool. Wow, that's a big wave. Right? I mean, it's like unfazed. They look at him, they're like, he must be a ghost. There's a whole thing there. But then he gets in the boat and the waves die down. Now, a lot of times we look at the storm in Matthew chapter 8 and the storm in Matthew 14 and we think they're the same. We think they're both caused by the enemy. We think that they're both, sometimes we think that they're both just attacks from the enemy and that the enemy is just trying to keep them from doing what God wanted them to do. But the last storm I would propose today is not an attack from the enemy. I would propose that the last storm is just simply a testing from God. It's a storm meant to develop and to grow. See, in Matthew chapter 8, one of the key aspects, the reason why we know that it's an attack of the enemy, if you'll turn there, Matthew chapter 8 and verse 23, starting in verse 23. Now in Matthew, this is a really short account of this storm, but it has contained in it the information we need to draw our conclusion. And in Matthew chapter 8, starting in verse 23, it says, "Now when he got into a boat, his disciples followed him, and suddenly a great tempest arose on the sea, so that the boat was covered with the waves, but he was asleep. Then his disciples came to him and awoke him, saying, 'Lord, save us, we are perishing.' But he said to them, 'Why are you fearful, O you of little faith?' Then he arose and rebuked the wind and the sea, and there was a great calm." The reason why I know that this was an attack from the enemy is because the way that this storm was handled by Jesus was through a rebuke. To me, that shows that it was a direct onslaught and that Jesus stood up in his authority and rebuked it. But in Matthew chapter 14, the end of the story plays out a little different. In Matthew chapter 14, and let's go down to verse 31. Chapter 14, verse 31. Says, "And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said, 'O you of little faith, why did you doubt?'" Now, what we'll see is that this is Peter, right? Because at this time, Jesus was walking on the sea. Peter had seen him out there, and Peter in his, sometimes I feel like I'm a lot like Peter. I don't always know what to say and when to say it, so the open mouth insert foot thing happens quite a bit. And I think I'm, farther along in my faith sometimes than I really am. Says, "Oh, Jesus, if that's you, just call me out on the water. I can do this, man." Jesus is like, "Come on." So he gets out there, he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Wasn't quite prepared for what he was going to experience, but thought he was ready to step into it. So he gets out there and he starts sinking, and in this verse, Jesus stretches out his hand, he lifts him out of the water, and he says, you had the faith to get out of the boat.
Yeah.
What happened? Right? But then, if we notice verse 32, and when Jesus and Peter got into the boat, the wind ceased. So in this one, he didn't rebuke anything. He didn't command anything to stop. He didn't rebuke it. He just stepped in the boat, and it just...
Yeah.
Any of you ever be in a class where you're doing a test and the teacher says, you've got this much time to do this test, I'll be back at the end of this time, and they walk out? And everybody's frantically doing the test, right? I mean, we're, oh man, what was the answer for that? And we're going through it, and we're trying to figure it out, right? We're like, dude, what'd you get for like 23? Was it C or D? But then all of a sudden, when the time is up, the teacher steps into the classroom and it's pencils down. Test over. The way I see this storm is that when Jesus stepped into the boat, the teacher stepped into the classroom, the test was over. So when we look at these storms, we have to recognize what's taking place between the storm in Matthew 8 and the storm in Matthew 14. Why would one be an attack, and why really would one be a test? I mean, why would God cause a storm? I mean, it was a pretty serious storm. And it wasn't just a serious, these are seasoned fishermen. They've seen some storms. And I'm sure that there's times where they brought the new guy into the boat, right? And they're out there fishing, and the wind kicks up, and the waves get probably this high, and the new guy's like, he's like, new guy, right? They're standing up, they're like, fishing, throwing their nets out, right? It's almost like they're surfing, because they're in this... Guy's getting sick, he's like hurling over the edge, they're like, he'll get there. This wasn't just like another stormy day. They've been out on stormy days. This was a serious issue. This was actually to the point where it was starting to look like life or death. Would God really bring a test into your life that what you did in that test could make the difference between life and death? We don't want to think about God actually doing something like that in our lives. We don't want to think about God being the kind of person who would you ever hear those dads who are like, how'd you learn how to swim? Yeah, no, we were on the dock, right? And I was standing there in my swimsuit, and I'm looking out, and I'm like, man, I really want to swim. And Daddy comes up, and he's like, what's up, son? I said, I want to go swimming, Daddy's like, okay. Sink or swim, figure it out. Could God really be? No. Right? No. No, God wouldn't do that. No, no. God wouldn't just lead somebody around in the wilderness for 40 years. No, God wouldn't do that. God wouldn't send John the Baptist out to the wilderness I mean, the dude dressed in camel hair and eating locusts. God wouldn't do that. I think sometimes we have a funny view of God.
That's true.
God's the creator of the universe. He can do whatever He wants to. We have limitations that God can't do. God can't do this. God can't do that. God can't do this. No. Honestly, God could do whatever He wanted to.
Amen.
Who is the clay to say to the potter, why did you make me this way? Does the potter not have the ability to make some as vessels of honor and some as vessels of dishonor both? And does he not have the ability to, if the vessel that he created, he just doesn't really, I mean, we really got to wrap our heads around it. If he doesn't really like it as the creator, he could just say, I'm just going to start over. Before I drew this picture, I can tell you that there were several that I had drawn that I got 2/3 of the way through, 3/4 of the way through, sometimes all the way through, and they didn't turn out quite like I was wanting, and they crumpled them up and threw them away. I have that right. I created it. Nobody else has the right to grab that up and crumple it up and throw it away. It's not yours. You didn't create it. I created it. I can do with it what I want to. I can hang it in a frame, put it on the wall, or I can take it out back, throw it in my fire pit and burn it if I want to. It's mine. I made it. God spoke concerning Pharaoh that I've hardened his heart. He said, I will destroy him. I created him for this purpose so that my glory could be revealed in the earth. You know what that basically means? Pharaoh was created as a vessel of dishonor so that the glory of God could be shown in the earth. But God wouldn't. Yeah, He would. He has. He can and He will. Maybe that's the missing ingredient to our ability to fear the Lord. Maybe that's what we're really missing. Matthew chapter 8, they get in this boat, they're going out on a storm. Now this is a spiritual attack. Jesus is sleeping. The word to us is that in the midst of the spiritual attack, we can rest. Why? Because the battle is not ours. The battle belongs to the Lord.
Amen.
But in Matthew chapter 14, they're working their butts off.
Yes, they are. Ruling for
There's no resting going on there. Because in the middle of the test and in the middle of the trial, when character needs to be developed, when our lives need to come into alignment with the character of God, you better believe there's going to be sacrifice and it's going to take some work.
Yep. True story.
interesting thing about the storm in Matthew chapter 14 is that the people who do the tours of Israel, they take people up to this mountain on this mountaintop, and it overlooks the Sea of Galilee. And they'll tell you when you get up there that this is where they believe that Jesus went to pray when he sent his disciples out to go the other side. Now, if they had any light in the boat, which they probably did, a lantern of some sort, it's very likely and very possible that Jesus could see them. Oh, I see. You're telling me not only would God create a storm to test me and to grow me, but that in the middle of this storm, he's not actually going to be there, but he's going to be outside of it watching me? I'm trying to mess with you all's theology. Is it working? Just a little? Because we read the Bible, but do we really read the Bible? Or do we just continue to see what we've always believed? At some point, you've got to actually read the Bible and see what it says and take what it says for what it says. Because what it says is that Jesus sent the disciples to the other side and he went up to the mountain to pray. This was when evening had come, and in the fourth watch of the night, see, it says when evening had come, the storm arose. When evening comes is the first watch of the night. The storm arose, but then it says that in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to the disciples. There's 4 watches in the night. The first, each watch is made up of 3 hours. You know what that means? That means that at the least, those disciples were out there fighting that storm for 9 hours before Jesus came to them.
A long time.
I mean, have you ever done anything solid, like the same action over and over and over again for 9 hours straight? I went to boot camp. Prison boot camp, not military boot camp. Prison boot camp is a little different than military boot camp. Because prison boot camp, they don't just have the instructors from that particular branch of military like the military does. Prison boot camp is actually made up of instructors who, every single one of them, were either former or currently in the special forces in different branches. You got it all. I mean, these dudes were nuts. This one guy, he was like my size. And we had this log, they called it the buddy log. And this buddy log, I'm not joking, this buddy log was this big around, and it was about 6 feet long. And the buddy log, 2 guys would get on each end of the log and they would carry it. When they had a fight or when they had a disagreement, they would assign them the buddy log for however many days. And both guys, one on each end, would have to carry this thing everywhere they went. And then when they ate, they'd have to put it down. They would both have to sit on the log facing each other and eat their meals. And then when they got done eating, they got up, they picked up the log, and they carried it again. So this one guy, he's this drill instructor. He's about my size. This dude was in the Army Rangers. And we went on a 2-mile run one day. This dude decided to show off. He picked up the buddy log by himself and ran 2 miles with the buddy log on his shoulder without stopping, yelling at us because we weren't keeping up. We didn't have a buddy log. I mean, it's like you get done and you're asking the dude, are you like genetically modified or something? I mean, you got robot parts? Because that's inhuman. Another drill instructor we had, he was 6'2". His name, he was actually our instructor. His name was O'Brien, and O'Brien was a Green Beret. And O'Brien would sprint. We're in Buena Vista, Colorado, 8,000 some hundred feet in elevation. The dude would sprint a 2-mile run. At 8,000 feet. He did a marathon up Pikes Peak. He didn't get first, but he got close. He said that was the hardest thing he ever did, but they made us one time. We were like the horrible platoon. It wasn't me. It's everybody else. I got punished for everybody else's mistakes.
Yeah.
Right? That's horrible. And so we're in third phase. There's 3 phases. Each phase is a month. It's a 3-month program. And we're in third phase, and we're getting close to graduation. And each phase, you have a cover that you get. And each cover is different. Each hat is different to show your progression through the phases. And third phase cover is supposed to be your graduation cover. We got in so much trouble that they took us out to the sand pit, which was this huge, like, massive squared off area just filled with sand where we'd get trashed, and they'd make us do all this stuff in the sand. It's a lot harder than on, you know. We dug down 6 feet into that sand pit, threw our third phase covers in, we didn't fill it back up with sand. We went around with wheelbarrows and got boulders and rocks and threw them in on top of the hats. And then we shoveled this snow dirt mix in on top of it because we were no longer fit to graduate. We were such a horrible platoon. And then that same day they took us into the squad bay and they made us get down in the push-up position. And for the next 4 hours, randomly, a drill instructor would come in and say, down, quarter, 3/4, up, down, and then walk out. And our lieutenant came in and he said, if anybody's knee touches the ground, you're done in boot camp, you're done, you're kicked out, you won't graduate. For 4 hours, we sat in a push-up position. After about an hour and a half, people started dropping like flies, man. And you know what? They didn't graduate. He was dead serious. These disciples are out in the middle of this sea. And they're rowing. And they're rowing. They're trying to keep this boat from sinking. They're trying to keep it from being capsized in the storm. They're trying to go. Jesus is up on a ledge just watching them for 9 hours. For 9 hours they're rowing and rowing and rowing and rowing. If they stop rowing, they're probably going to die. And Jesus is just watching them. See, one of the words that I think God wants to tell us today is that it's not always going to be easy. We get this idea sometimes in our head that because I'm a Christian, because I'm a child of God, that should then elicit some kind of favor in my life where my life should be easy. And if that's your thought process, I'm going to tell you that you're probably a little immature and a little lot spoiled from somebody else.
Come on.
Somewhere along the line, somebody spared the rod and spoiled the Don't get upset at me yet. Don't get upset at me until the end. In Matthew chapter 10, between chapter 8 and chapter 14 in Matthew chapter 10, something happens. In verse chapter 1, it says that He called the disciples unto Himself. And He told them that they were going to go out in front of Him. He commissioned them. He laid His hands on them. He gave them power and authority. And then it says that after this, He sent out the 12 apostles. In verse 1, they were disciples. In verse 2, they were apostles. A commissioning had taken place. The Word of God had been spoken over their lives and said, you are an apostle. How many of you had great prophetic words, right? Oh man, I've had this huge prophetic word. Woo, I'm so pumped. Man, you're just naive. You don't know what that means.
Right.
When you get the big prophetic word over your life, no, you should not be pumped. You should be terrified.
That's right.
This is where a lot of personal prophecy is really getting it wrong today. Because we're giving people a commission without letting them know of the cost of the sacrifice that's going to be required.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we're setting them up for failure. God's commissioned you to be a great prophet, brother. Hallelujah. Nothing but the goodness of God, the days of your life. And then 2 weeks from now, his life turns into a living hell. What happened?
Yeah.
The word's working.
Right.
But nobody told him what was going to happen.
Exactly right.
And so in the middle of his hell, he looks up at God and says, I didn't sign up for this. You didn't tell me about this. I'm done. How many prophets go into the wilderness and never come back out? You ever wonder why it says that many are called but few are chosen? Because I think there's a great mortality rate between the calling and the office. Too many get called, but they don't expect what it's going to take to get into the office. And they perish along the way. And some of that's our fault. Because we don't tell them what they're getting themselves, or what is coming down the line. And we've built this thing in the prophetic where it's like, man, I got like 20 big words this week. How many did you get? And we're sitting there and we're like, whoever got the most from the greatest prophets, man, I wish I was a spiritual head. Did you hear the word he just got? Man, where's my word, Lord? Lord, where's my word? I'm coming to the place where it's like, thank God I haven't had a word in a long time. A little season of rest would be really nice. It's in Matthew chapter 10. After they're called to be apostles, in verse 16, Jesus says, behold, I mean, that doesn't even sound like a fighting chance. Sheep and wolves.
Yeah.
Who's going to win that fight? What's the sheep going to do? Like, grow fangs and bite them or something? I mean, get the killer hooves and... They do got some killer hooves, okay? Don't let them fool you. They kick you when you're trying to cheer them and stuff. Yeah, it hurts. But therefore be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Really? So not only are you sending me out as a sheep among wolves, but you're telling me now I can't fight? Be harmless as doves? What? But beware of men, for they will deliver you up to councils and scourge you in their synagogues. You will be brought before governors and kings for my sake, as a testimony to them and to the Gentiles. But when they deliver you up, do not worry about how or what you should speak, for it will be given to you in that hour that you should speak. For it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father who speaks in you. Now brother will deliver up brother to death, and father his child, and children will rise up against parents and cause them to be put to death. And you will be hated by all for my name's sake. But he who endures to the end will be saved. Great commissioning of apostleship, right? I want to be an apostle. God picked me. Where's my prophetic word to be an apostle? Did you read this recently? No, this is what happens to apostles. This is what the future for apostles look like. Let's create a theme park at Disney World, right? The Apostle Theme Park. First, we'll just put you in stocks, we'll whip you a few times. Then we'll throw you in a little cell that's so big or so small you can't even move around. You have to stand up 24 hours a day. Fall asleep just leaning on a wall. We'll leave you there for about 3 days. Where are we going to go to the bathroom? Right where you're at. Isn't this fun? Who wants to be next? It's the calling of an apostle. Read 1 Corinthians chapter 4. Paul said, we're despised and rejected among men. It says, but he who endures to the end will be saved. How do you think that endurance was going to come? How do you think that was going to be developed in their lives? I mean, I can read a few chapters back, and the disciples
Big place.
kind of like, right? Oh, Jesus, dude, why you always got to be up so early on a Sunday? Seriously, can I just sleep in today? I'm tired. I don't want to come to church. Jesus, no, come on, man. Why you always got to be out in the streets witnessing to people? Can't we just like go home and relax? I need me time, Jesus. And then we build up these crazy theologies. God wants you to have you time. Where? Where? God just wants me to go play. Stop. No, I can see this playing out, right? We'll bring Paul in, right? And we'll have Paul up here, and then we'll come in. Paul, you don't understand. God wants us to play. Paul would look at you like you lost it, man. You're like, what? No, I mean, I'm not saying you can't have fun while you're doing what you do, because it should be fun. There should be part of it that's fun, right? You should enjoy the call. Listen, because when you're in the will of the Lord, there is true joy. There is true rest. There is true peace. There is true comfort. There is life and life more abundantly. But you don't have to go outside of the will. If you're going outside of the calling to seek the rest and the joy and the peace and the comfort, then you're probably in the wrong place, or your heart's not in the right place at the least. More than likely, it's probably your heart. More than likely, there's still too much of this stuff getting in the way. God, why can't I just be like everybody else? I mean, they got the big fifth wheel camper with the toy hauler that they put on the back of that, with the boat that they put on the back of that, and the 15-ton pickup that they haul it all out to the lake with, that's all jacked up and is so tall that nobody can get in it without doing the skydive from an airplane and try to land in it. I mean, why can't I be like them? Because they're not called.
That's right, exactly right.
See, if they ever come to this place in their life where they submit under the will of the Lord and they get called, they won't be like that either.
True.
You know why? Because there are greater things happening than amassing this massive getaway package. There are greater things happening than amassing this ability to escape from the reality of life every single weekend. There are greater things at stake. There is more that God is trying to do in this world than just get everybody on the planet to take the 4x4 up to the mountains every single weekend and enjoy themselves. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than you. It's bigger than each one of us. But God wants to use each one of us to make it happen. But that's not going to happen until we come to the place where we are able to endure. Because endurance is going to be required. Because the call of God on your life means a sacrifice.
That's right.
You know what the disciples had to do? To be able to get in a boat and row for 9 hours against the storm, and they probably weren't making any ground, and there were probably some times when they were actually closer to shore where they started than they were when the storm hit. You know what they had to do to be able to make it through that? You know what they had to do to be able to, a few years after the resurrection of Jesus, to stand in the midst of those that would chop off their head or burn them or crucify them? Do you know what they had to do? There was a decision that had to be made in the life of every disciple in order for them to actually step into the apostle that they were called to. And the decision was that someplace they had to come to this point where the call was greater than the cost of the sacrifice that would be required. At some point, they had to decide that what Jesus was telling us to do was greater and worth far more than any sacrifice that would be required along the way. If it's not, you're not going to endure. If it's not, you're not going to make it to the end. See, if it's not, you're going to find yourself in a position where you're standing on the precipice of a true failure. And in that moment of true failure is the moment of decision. Is this call really worth this sacrifice? This sacrifice. And if you haven't made up your mind before you got there, chance of you making the right decision in the moment is going to be slim. Some people ask me, because I've shared from here before, from the pulpit, I've shared, man, we go to Torrington every other Saturday. That's a 12-hour day. That's 500 miles in the car. It's 1,000 miles a month. Between Torrington and the restorative justice stuff I do, I put over 2,000 miles a month on my car. On top of that, I own my own business. I do my own work. On top of that, I minister here at the church. On top of that, I have a wife and a son. Why do you do why don't you just quit? If it's so tiring, why don't you? I'm not telling you that because I want you to feel sorry for me.
That's right, Rick.
I'm telling you that because I want you to at some point come into a place in your life where you understand, look, there is a call that is greater than the sacrifice.
Amen. That is the purpose. Yeah.
I've come to the place in my life where I will drive 1,000 miles a month to Torrington. I will put another 1,000 a month just for restorative justice. I will preach here at this church. I will have a family. I will have work because the call is greater than the sacrifice. And guess what? It's not always gonna be easy. I wonder if Daddy ever told him, it's not always going to be easy, son. Matter of fact, it's going to get real hard. I wonder if there was this place where his will had to be set before he even left heaven. I wonder if there was this place where Jesus had to say, Daddy, the call that you're putting on me is far greater than the cost of the sacrifice. I personally believe that decision had to be made before he even came here. Because when you lay down the power and you take up humanity, it's too late to try and figure out if it's worth it.
Right.
The decision had to be made before the decision had to be made. Sometimes, in the middle of my storm, when it looks like everything is lost, when I feel like Jesus isn't there, sometimes I just have to push through because that's all I can do, and because I've determined within myself before that storm ever came that I was going to follow Him. It doesn't matter if it doesn't get easy. It doesn't matter if, like my Savior, I end up dying in the process. It doesn't matter. See, it doesn't matter if Jesus tells me to go to the other side and I die before I get there, or I die trying to get there. That doesn't matter. What matters is I've made the determination that I'm going to listen to Him and I'm going to at least go to the other side or die trying to get there. Some died not having received the promise.
It says,
of my personal gain from this process. I have to. As long as I am still pushing forward in what I believe God called me to do, because I think that I've got something to get out of it, I'm doing it for the wrong motivation. I'm doing it for the wrong reason. At some point in my Christian life, I have to come to the place where I say, God, I don't care if I get anything out of it or not. I have to say, it's not for my glory. It's for your glory.
Yes.
And if my death in the middle of this sea, fighting these waves, is going to bring you glory, then it's for your glory. If I don't make it through this storm, but it brings you glory, and I'll fight till the last day of my last breath. And I'll sit in the middle of this storm. God, get me out of this place. When's it going to stop? When are you going to give me a break? When are you going to give me the blue skies and the sunshine and the fair weather? When you get to heaven.
Yes. Yes.
That's when it'll stop. You might have some breaks along the way, and I pray we will.
We will.
But are you going through it just for the fair weather? Is everything you're doing an attempt to get to the place where you can finally just sit back and relax? Because I would say that that's not the end goal in mind that God has for your life on this earth. There's nothing wrong with relaxing. But again, is the call worth the sacrifice? You have to make that decision. Only you can make that decision. I can't make it for you. I can't even tell you that you have to decide, yes, it is. You can decide no. You can say no. You can go back to your life. You can try to work your way around the storms. You can try to work whatever you want to do. But if God's put a call on your life, you know what I will tell you? That He will either transform your character or you will die in the process. God can raise up a ministry really easy. He'll kill a ministry for the sake of a man. He can start up another mega church with the snap of his fingers if he wants to. But the guy that He called to be the pastor, he'll destroy that work if it means saving that person. He's more interested in your character than He is in your ministry. He doesn't want you to get to the point where the blessings are poured out, but the foundation of your character is not strong enough to hold it. And the process, it's not going to be easy. And it will probably go on until the day you die.
Yes.
Because there will always be some refining, there will always be some polishing, some reworking. There'll always be a need for some of that. I never said it was going to be easy. And if we brought ourselves into this place in Christianity where we think it should be, then you're extremely deceived. But He did say that He would give us power. He did say that He would help us through it. He did say that He was working all things together for our good. Right? There's hope in this. The purpose of this word is not to get us to a place where we say, I don't ever want to be called. But it's to get us to the place where we say, you know what? I'm willing to be called. And I'm ready to count the cost. And I'm ready to determine in my mind and in my heart whatever God wants to do in me, through, in this world as a result of my life. And whatever sacrifice is going to be required to make that happen, it's worth it.
It's worth it.
We found ways to take the words of Jesus and say, when He says that nobody has left brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers and sons and daughters for my sake. And where He actually says that's kind of a requirement. And we've taken that and we've turned it into this happy Christianity. Yeah. No, God, I moved to this God-forsaken town. I left my mother and my father and my brothers and my sisters for your sake. That means that in Rollins, I get to be king on the hill.
I get 100-fold.
We lost our minds. When the reality should be, God, if I need to leave brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers and husbands and wives because you've called me to forsake all, to sacrifice all, to lay it all down on the altar so that you can be glorified in this earth, I don't care if there's 100-fold or not. I don't care if there's a reward or not. Just simply because you asked me to, I will.
I will.
No reward needed. No big paycheck at the end of the week. At the end of the day. No pats on the back, attaboys. You don't need to do that. I'll just simply do it because you asked me to.
Yeah.
Man, what could God do through a person?
Has a heart like that?
There's a video I want to play, then we'll close with a song afterwards, but just to kind of get us a little pumped up again. Terry, could you play that video?
Consistency separates winners from wannabes. Diligence makes the difference between all-time greats and one-hit wonders. For the race is not given to the swift or to the strong, but to the one who endures to the end. So pick yourself up, shake your past off, put one foot in front of the other, and do it again. When you hear that little voice saying no one believes in you, you're too far behind, you're too small, this isn't working and this isn't worth it, another voice rises to remind you that the same power, the same strength, the same spirit that raised the Savior from a borrowed grave is alive and active in you. This is your guarantee of complete victory. The same God who delivered you from the lion and the bear can and will deliver this new giant into your hands. So draw the line, take your stand, just like you wielded your weapons last time. Do it again. You've been here before. The battle is not yours, it's the Lord's. And if He caused you to triumph back then, be confident He'll do it again. started and sustained by His grace. He has never failed, never faltered, never wavered, never lost, and He's not about to start. But receiving this promise requires perseverance. For many are called, but few are chosen. Many begin, few are finished. So don't just do it again. I know sometimes it's hard to keep it moving when you can't see your progress, when you've lost your perspective, when the pain has pushed you past your breaking point. But this is no time to tap out. This is no time to back down. This is no time to turn around. Because the end of yourself is the beginning of Him. The end of your strength is the beginning of His. So fix your focus, wake your courage, stir your confidence, and do it again. The dream God put inside of you is free, but to see it come to pass, you'll have a price to pay. Set your face like flint with determination and declare, I will do it again. When it doesn't make sense, I'll do it again. When I have to go against the wind, I'll do it again. When all hell is breaking loose, I will not be crippled by confusion. I will not sway to the cadence of complacency. When it feels like hope has disappeared from the horizon, and I'm waiting for rain, but I don't see any signs, I will look again, lifting my eyes to the skies. I see a cloud the size of a man's head, starting to expand. And it may start small, but little is much when God is in it. And I know I'll win if I just don't quit. Don't you dare quit. When you march 6 laps and still the walls won't fall, take another lap. You're closer than you think you are. You're closer than you've ever been before. Walk on. You've come too far to faint. He who spoke it is faithful to fulfill it. Show up today and the next day and the next day and the next day. Press till something happens. Pray till something changes. Push till something breaks. Say within yourself, whatever it takes, whatever the cost, no matter what they say, no matter what I feel, I've got a job to do, and I will see this through until God's kingdom comes and His will is done in my life. I'm leaving every excuse behind. I'm being transformed by the renewing of my mind. I'm picking up my cross and following the one who never stopped short, who never surrendered, who said He'd never leave me or forsake me. Jesus is with me always. He came and conquered. He died and rose again. And now He's calling me, causing me, commanding me to breathe again, hope again, trust again, give again, change again, expect again, rejoice again, fight again, rise again, right here, right now, in the name of Jesus, I will live again.
We're going to pray. We're going to do a song. Altars are open.
You saved my life from death. I was all but defeated. You spoke your promises and brought life to my weakness. Came as a conquering king, and you won for my freedom. My soul can't help but sing hallelujah.
Thank you.